I have here a Husky 701 Enduro, and it's just a standard version. I'm adapting it to the long range version by installing the IMS fuel tanks. Are nicely designed. As you see, they're slung low on the frame of the bike. There's two of them. There's a great capacity, almost doubles the size of the fuel capacity, and they're nicely designed. You have heavy mounting down here, and you have some mounts up here, and your venting system is well thought out. Runs up into here, back, tees into here with this one, with your drain. So it backs up into here like, yeah, okay. So I want to go over some of the issues with the installation of it. The drawings are really well done. Instructions. It's pretty straightforward, but there's a couple of catches I'd like to talk to you about. When you go to fit the tanks, there's the canister with the carbon in it for the fuel overflow. That's over here. There's a component you can move to the inside. I used the eliminator and got rid of the carbon can from Rottweiler. I bought these tanks from Rottweiler also. And just arrange everything over here so the tank fits nicely. You mount up the mounts. They're pretty straightforward. The directions are great. But starting these 4 bolts, you see the different angles here. So you can only start 2 of them. The other 2 don't line up till you bring the tank down. So when you bring the tank down, then you can start the other 2 bolts. Be very careful. They're brass embedded in the plastic. And if you're not careful, you'll cross thread them. And if you cross thread them, then you're in trouble. So you got to be careful. If you do cross thread one, just stop and get a tap and clean the threads and then reinstall them. Another issue I had, yeah, look how nicely slung they are. And you use some of the old components to bolt onto these fuel tanks, which is kind of nice. All right, another issue here is taking the tank loose, the main tank really loose. They want you to take it right off. But there's a place here for the fuel, Petcock, for these tanks to fill into the main tank. It's right there. And the nuts are embedded in the plastic once again, but there's no hole for the fuel. So if you just lay the tank back without taking it off, just lean it back, you can take a drill bit, heat it and turn it, and you'll bore through the plastic right in the center, and you clean it up and it's beautiful. Then you just sand it and make sure the plastic fuel tank is fair. Nicely done. Just take your time. I mounted it with the stock gasket and some aviation gasket cement you can get at Napa, and it's squeezed out quite a bit, but it's sealed. You can see the rubber squeezed out, but it did seal. So if I were to do it again, I might use different gasket material and install an O-ring in there. You don't want to have a leak there, that's for sure. And I use those bands to squeeze the fuel lines together. See, you can buy a kit inexpensively. So routing the fuel lines, I use fire sleeve on this side because of the exhaust pipe. And I also put an inline filter right here on both sides to filter the fuel, because why not? You have it. You have long runs of fuel lines, so you never know where you'll be getting fuel, so why not have fuel filters? You know, and you have the stock one, of course, up underneath, up in here. You have the stock one. That, I think I'm going to get an add-on to that one. I think it's back ordered. So when you route your fuel lines for these aux tanks, it comes here. There's a quick disconnect right here. And it tees off to the left side, straight to the right side. And the routing, you know, you just lay it out carefully. Up front here, when I went to install the supplied fuel fittings, there wasn't Petcocks. They didn't fit real well, and they leaked. I didn't like it. So what I did was I went online and I found these fuel Petcocks, a left and a right. I got those from Revzilla. They were, I think, 15 bucks a piece. And I just took a guess at the spacing of the bolt pattern. And lo and behold, they were the same as these that IMS supplies. So what you need to do, you need to go to the hardware store, get some longer bolts, because these are countersink screws for this. So get some longer bolts for the Petcocks. The Petcocks supply self-tapping screws. You're not going to use those. And with the supplied O-ring right here, I went one up and used a thicker O-ring for any imperfections of the plastic. So I used these O-rings, which I got from a kit from Harbor Freight, and discarded the stock O-rings. I was considering making gaskets like this with a flat O-ring from an aviation fuel system, or smaller O-rings like this from the kit, and different gasket materials. But I didn't have to. So I mounted up the Petcocks. Remember, it's got off on reserve, but the Petcock's laying horizontal. The end of it's tilting up a little, but you don't have it, just on, you know, pretty much. So I mounted them up and they went on pretty nice. Right here, as you can see. I was very pleased with it. And here, it's at an angle because of the hot exhaust. So I had to trim back the mount for the radiator a little bit, right there. Trim it back and then paint it so it doesn't rust. And that fit right on. I shortened that arm for the Petcock. And there you have it. Now we have double the range. And it's a nice installation. And it's low slung. And beautiful weight distribution, if you think about it. From the rear tank to the front tank. It's really nice. Now, I considered these, I looked at the other fuel tanks. If you have a supermoto, you might want to get the little one that fits in here. The little baby tank that fits in there. But then you got a tiny little air cleaner. I wanted as much air filtering as possible. So I went with the Rottweiler system, which is really nice. And then you do some additional mods, of course, because you've got this intake system, so why not tune it? So you then the power commander and auto tune. It goes on and on. It's really, there's a lot of accessories for this bike, so it's really a lot of fun. And this bike really hauls ass. So that's it with the fuel tank installation. I really like it. It's well done. It's strong. The next thing I need to do is find some guards that'll fit with this on, because the guards I bought don't fit now. But I got to find something that does fit.